flash. Greg, what do you have?
Well, Paul, investors of all sorts are looking over their shoulders, seeing how close behind them coronavirus is following. It's rattling the global financial markets. U.S. stocks are plunging. Treasuries are rallying. Investors are waiting for details of any policy response from the Trump administration. And it's not just about the virus. The battle for control of the global oil market has intensified again. Saudi Arabia has promised to increase production. And the EIA is saying that crude oil inventories are up 7.66 million barrels. Steen Jacobson, as Saxo Bank CIO, tells Bloomberg the oil price war will help push the U.S. toward recession.
Traditionally, historically, of course, U.S. was an importer of oil and as such was benefiting massively. This time they have to deal with the fallout from the capital structure of the energy sector and major businesses like Shell and energy under attack. So net, I think we had a 90% probability of recession in the U.S. And it's only because nothing is 100% except bank intervention and death that I don't say 100%.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is currently down 3.3%, down 94. The Dow is down 3.5%, down 878. And the NASDAQ is down over 3%, down 252. The 10-year is currently up 22.30 seconds. The yield is 0.73%. West Texas Intermediate, on all the news we've got, is down 2.6% at 33.50 a barrel. COMEX Gold is down about 0.5% at 16.53.30 an ounce. The dollar yen 104.65. The euro $1.1306 and the British pound $1.2928. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa and Paul.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. The bad news just keeps happening for Boeing. Just to bring you this additional headline just crossing, that Boeing loses 18% of Air Canada's 737 MAX order amid the grounding of the jets. This sort of dual whammy here of the slowdown in travel as a result of the coronavirus, as well as the 737 MAX jets grounding. Boeing shares down more than 8%. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, here with us in our interactive broker studios to hit the action in smaller companies. I'm very curious to see what we're seeing because those typically are more leveraged to growth. How are they doing today?
Worse. In short, the Russell 2000 index is down 4% and the S&P 500 is lower by 3.2%. Now, 3 of the Russell's 4 biggest losses belong to energy stocks priced at less than $1 a share. The one that's fallen the most is FTS International, the ticker there, FTSI. It's down more than 30%. Laredo Petroleum, ticker LPI, is down almost 29%. And Extraction Oil and Gas, ticker XOG, is down about 24.5%. Then there's Avid Bio Services, ticker CDMO. The drug researcher has lost more than 27%. Avid's fiscal third quarter results were worse than analysts expected based on the Bloomberg survey. Now, if you look at the biggest gains in the Russell, you see several developers of coronavirus medicines. You've got Inovio Pharmaceuticals, ticker INO, up 35%. Vir Biotechnology, ticker VIR, up 18.5%. And Enzo Biochem, ticker ENZ, up 16.5%. And one more for you. The drug maker Mallinckrodt, ticker MNK, has risen more than 18%. The company said New York State joined in supporting a proposed $1.6 billion settlement of opioid claims.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. One of the narratives that I've been hearing about and people are looking for some sense of capitulation in the market is just wait for the retail investors. When they start dumping stock, that's when you know it's over. Our next guest maybe says, maybe not so sure. Eric Balchunas, senior ETF analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. So, Eric, what's the ETF world telling you about how the individual retail investors been looking at this market volatility?
Look, I mean, it was just like 2018. 2018 was a great snapshot because ETFs were big at that point, and they took in money every month. And these are ETFs like Vanguard, Schwab, and the iShares Core Series. What we do is, in our flow data, we separate out SPY, IWM, because those are used like pseudo futures. The traders come in and out of those things like a hotel. So those flows can contaminate or overshadow the rest of the ETF. So we separate them out. So we look at those ETFs used by advisors and allocators. They continue to take in money. That's the chart I'm looking at for if that goes negative, I think it's time to worry. But over the years, as long as that's positive, I've tended to just take a deep breath. Although this sell-off does feel just a little more severe than 2018. But remember, 2018 Q4 was pretty rough. So I'm looking at those numbers and I'm seeing that for the most part, Investors are continuing, and there's really two main reasons for this. One is this: the internet has spread information. People are sharing information with each other. They've read a lot of education on how timing the market's almost impossible to win. So there's education on not biting, not taking the bait of a red on the screen. The second thing is advisors have moved from a broker model where a mutual fund pays them to a fiduciary model where they get a percentage of the client assets. Once you move to the fiduciary model, you're with your investor shoulder to shoulder. And now one of their biggest value propositions is called behavioral coaching. So what they're saying is one of the reasons you need me is because I'm going to talk you off the ledge. So with these advisors acting like as a major buffer, and in the past, the broker might want to churn the account because they get kickback from the mutual fund. So I think the retail investor is a much stronger, more disciplined retail investor than in bygone eras.
Eric, I'm glad you're here. I really am. I've always
I'm glad you're here too.
Good. I mean, I can always expect this kind of take from you, which I think is totally important and sort of like a gut check, a reality check. Here's the narrative, and this is why everything is just fine, and the ETFs are functioning well, and people aren't freaking out, and they're not running for the exits. That said, I'll present the other side.
There it comes. Killjoy. That's my nickname for her, Killjoy.
Yeah. Well, for him, it's everything is fine guy. I will say, though, that there is a question, first of all, of whether the real shifts in allocations are going to be the real issue here. Basically, are we going to see people move their 401ks or change their allocations or sort of become more risk off and risk averse, and that's really the type of tweaking and changing that's really going to have an effect on markets. It's not going to be this.
Possibly. What I would look for is this. Look for active mutual funds. Those are owned by older investors, boomers, and they largely were probably put in there by a broker, so they might have less loyalty, shorter time horizon. I'm watching those flows. You could see some selling pressure if we see major outflows. In 2018, same thing. We saw $500 billion come out of active mutual funds. That's a lot. We don't have data showing quite the same in this recent sell-off, but it could get bad. That would be one. And a lot of those people have the 401ks you're talking about. Okay. In terms of the younger, I think they're rebalancing into equities because remember how you like this chart that shows equity net fund flows have been negative over the past couple years?
Yeah.
And you're like, what's going on? What's going on there isn't bearish. It's that people are taking off the equities a little because they're rebalancing back into fixed income, so they're trying to keep a percentage allocation to equities. Now, if equities sell off, that percentage goes down. You may even see them rebalance into equities. But yes, there's going to be some panicking, of course. Not everybody's like this. I just think the core of the retail investor is much stronger than people give them credit for.
Really valuable, and I could go for another 10 minutes. We didn't even get to HYG. We didn't even get to the high-yield bond ETFs, which have seen really big outflows and really big discount to NAVs, actually. But we have 30 seconds.
The Muni one. HYD had a 7% discount. Our Muni analyst, Eric Kazatsky, says that's a leading indicator. Look for the bonds to catch up. So if you see a discount, that's probably bad news for the underlying.
27 seconds, 26. Eric, we could talk for 10 minutes. I wish we could. Eric Balchunas, we will. Senior ETF analyst, Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us here in our interactive broker studios. Always wonderful to have him. Just want to bring you some headlines just crossing that Harvey Weinstein has been sentenced to 23 years in prison altogether for a criminal sex act and more. We'll bring you more to it right now. Amy Morris has world and national news from Washington, D.C. Amy.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Democrats are now saying that it is time for the White House to take bolder action to help the country contain the spread of the coronavirus. Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro brings us the latest.
Senate Democrats are preparing a letter formally calling on President Donald Trump to issue a national emergency declaration. Sources tell Bloomberg it would make more than $40 billion available to help state and local governments' virus response. FEMA would be able to spend money stored in the Disaster Relief Fund. Among lawmakers expected to sign the letter, Washington Senator Patty Murray. The Seattle region seeing one of the worst COVID-19 outbreaks in the country. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
The U.S. Treasury Department is considering extending the 2019 tax filing deadline beyond April 15th to provide relief from economic disruption caused by the coronavirus outbreak. Sources tell Bloomberg News officials have been discussing the idea while the Trump administration considers measures to relieve economic pressures. Infrastructure spending, a temporary payroll tax cut, and paid sick leave are among the proposals floated in a meeting between President Trump and Republican senators. Senate Republicans have turned their focus now to broad economic stimulus plans, while House Democrats are working on a bill that is more narrowly tailored to respond to the coronavirus. Former Vice President Joe Biden was the big winner in yesterday's primaries in Michigan, Missouri, Idaho, and Mississippi. Senator Bernie Sanders, won the North Dakota Democratic presidential caucuses. Washington State, though, still too close to call. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia.
Aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge with a roaring first race special every day of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on the first race at Cheltenham on the main race market only. Place terms apply. Eligibility restrictions. Offers vary each day. Check site for details. T's and C's apply. 18 plus. BeGambleAware.org.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P sinks more than 3.5%, and that wipes out more than half of yesterday's surge. This after President Donald Trump failed to deliver on his promise for a sweeping stimulus package to fight the economic effects of the coronavirus. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is down 3.7% now, down 105. The Dow is down over 4%, down 1,013. And the NASDAQ is down 3.3%, down 273. The 10-year is currently up 830 seconds. The yield is 0.77%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 3.8% at $33.03 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.7% at $16.49.30 an ounce. The dollar yen, 104.70. The euro, $1.1278. And the British pound, $1.2905. Well, Disney shareholders greeted the new chief executive officer at an entertainment annual meeting by narrowly approving his executive compensation plan. Only 53% of the shareholders approved the plan. Right now, Disney is down 5.3%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, it seems to be a race as to how quickly Wall Street strategists can downgrade their expectations for earnings. The latest, Goldman Sachs chief strategist for U.S. equities, David Kostin, said the 11-year-old bull market U.S. stocks is about to become history, and he now predicts that earnings will drop at least 12% in each of the next 2 quarters due to plunging oil prices, as well as the spread of the coronavirus and people staying at home and not traveling. The question is, how do you invest, right? I mean, this does expect sort of a decline in equities going forward. How long do people expect it to go on for? Is this a time to be buying or just to get out of the market? And Bill Smead has tons of experience with all of this as the CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Smead Capital Management, which has more than $2 billion of assets under management, joining us from Seattle. Bill, I'd love to get your thoughts around that. How do you sort of reframe your investing assumptions based on the events over the past month or so?
Well, thanks for having us, and this is a great time to think about those kinds of long-term things that are the most important. So what we feel this is from an investment standpoint is the exacerbation of a trend that's been in place for a good 5 to 10 years, which is the anemic economy scenario where people don't want to own companies that are tied closely to the Main Street on the ground economy, and instead want to own the successful technology companies that don't seem to have be impacted by where people are. Right? If you're stuck at home, you might still be sitting on your Facebook, maybe more than even normal. So we, from a historical standpoint, this looks to us like Paul Volcker tightening credit in 1981, when bonds were already so oversold and so miserable. The bond market had been terrible for 30 years, and in comes Paul Volcker, and he tightens credit, and bonds get slaughtered. Stocks were already cheap. They got slaughtered again. And Y2K, the Y2K thing caused people to buy a whole bunch of technology stuff in 1999 and get really excited about technology right before the end. And in this particular case, growth investments have been doing dramatically better. Value holds most of the stocks that are economically sensitive. Therefore, what's getting punished the most at the end of a major trend is the thing that was already cheap.
So, Bill, is there a valuation point here for the market that you think investors should be kind of keeping their eye on to try to get a sense of where the bottom might be?
Well, that's a great question. If historical situations like this have any merit in analyzing it, and remember, you're talking about an exogenous event that no one could see coming, and then Saudi Arabia took out the Amazon playbook and decided to use their position to undercut everyone else's price and put them out of business. Those two things happened. In other words, the Saudi Arabians would have never been able to do this if the coronavirus had not greatly affected demand around the world for oil and gas.
Right now, go ahead.
So these two just completely wild, historically unusual things are hitting simultaneously. So what you should expect is that investments you make now in the areas that people are the most afraid of right now are likely to produce the highest returns over the course of the next 10 years. And the investments that they run back to immediately and have sold way less, that they've got the most confidence in, are highly unlikely to be the best investments of the next 10 years.
Are you basically saying buy stocks, sell bonds?
Well, first of all, mathematically, a 10-year Treasury has zero chance of investment success in the next 10 years. Unless you consider 0.7% return and investment success. If someone's retirement goals get matched with 0.7% return, or a pension plan or an endowment works at 0.7%, so that's DOA, right? This is the antithesis of 1981. In 1981, the treasuries were 13% to start the year and went to 15%. Bond investors got slaughtered, but those 13% bonds for 30 years were one of the best investments you could possibly make, even though you had to get abused for a while in the first year that you owned them. And that's the nature of this. The courage to own things that will do well over 10 years, but make you feel like a fool in the short run.
And talking about just the pain, the market has rolled over, taken a leg lower even still, with the S&P now down more than 4% and the Dow, Paul, down 4.5% as we sit here.
Yeah, looking at the VIX here, out 6 points to 53. As you talk about fear in the marketplace, Bill, that's kind of a good example here. So just real quick, Bill, what are some of the things, what's your bottom line advice to your clients and your investors right here?
Well, first of all, for people that are going to be investors for the next 30 years, especially people that have been, have been sitting on the sidelines, to begin some kind of dollar cost averaging here looks like it would be a fantastic idea, because the virus itself is no matter what the ultimate totals are, right. And we all feel terrible because we hate that anyone would die from this, but we will kind of have a really strong feel within 30 to 60 days what the total of this is going to be. And at the point that starts to decline, that's when investors will get their legs back underneath them. So, got it. So yeah, so that our view, of course, is take the long term. We're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for your opinions here. We really appreciate it. Bill Smead, Capital Management.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are plunging. Investors looking for a policy response from the Trump administration as the coronavirus threatens economic growth. The latest sell-off comes with no sign of the stimulus package promised by President Trump. Plus, the European Central Bank warned of an economic shock similar to the financial crisis unless leaders act urgently. Hilton is pulling its guidance for 2020 because of the effects of the coronavirus, joining other travel companies that are taking a hit from the epidemic. McDonald's will offer staff at corporate-owned restaurants 2 weeks' pay in the event of a quarantine. These locations, however, account for about 5% of total U.S. locations, with the rest being franchised. And Tesla will build its in-development Cybertruck at a new plant in the U.S., likely triggering a state-by-state competition. CEO Elon Musk did not elaborate on which states Tesla is considering, beyond saying the company will pick a location in the central U.S. Courtney Dunhope, Bloomberg Radio.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative, and that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
petrol or electric. Why choose petrol and electric? Discover the BMW plug-in hybrid and electric range. 14th to the 21st of March. Visit your BMW retailer. Sometimes electric, always BMW. Participating retailers only.
Switch to Sky Broadband Superfast. It's so reliable, we'll guarantee your speeds or money back. And for a short time only, it's just £25 a month for 18 months with a $19.95 setup fee. So stay connected with super reliable, super fast broadband at a super low price. Switch or recontract today. Search sky.com. Offer ends 12th of March. Prices may change during this period. Includes Sky Pay as you talk. Sky Fibre areas only. Speeds vary by location. 1 month subscription refund if speeds drop below minimum download speed for 3 consecutive days. Claim twice in minimum term after first 14 days. See sky.com/guarantee.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll ask whether America is ready to elect a Democratic socialist for president. Plus, the science fiction legend William Gibson on climate change and the end of the future.
How often do you hear the phrase, the 22nd century? Don't hear it. We no longer have that sense of cultural anticipation.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up in the next half hour, we'll be talking about President Trump's plan to combat any potential slowdown to the coronavirus, or that coming out of Congress. What are the next steps? Plus, we'll take a look at oil in the wake of Saudi Arabia and Russia's price war. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Wait, what's that smell? It's hand sanitizer. More of it, and the need for that hand sanitizer is what's causing concern, and that's what's putting markets in the red, at least part of it. Oil's the other thing. Stocks have plunged. Treasuries are up. Investors are hoping for details on a policy response from the Trump administration. Oil's rebound from its biggest crash in a generation halted after Saudi Arabia said it would boost its production capacity, and the United Arab Emirates joined in raising supplies. Jeff Curry, Goldman Sachs Global Head of Commodities Research, tells Bloomberg oil, in his opinion, has further to go down.
If you end up backing up oil into the mid-continent of the U.S., you could see, markets like WTI, Midland, really disconnect to the downside. So we're far from being out of the woods here. We think there's a lot more substantial downside risk.
Right now, WTI is down 2.5%. We'll look at more of that in a minute. But right now, we check the markets every 15 minutes. S&P's down 4%, down 115. The Dow is down 4.4%, down 1,090. The NASDAQ is down 3.6%, down 303. The 10-year is currently up 10.30 seconds with a yield of 0.76%. Back to West Texas Intermediate, it is at 33.50 a barrel, as I say, down 2.5%. COMEX Gold is down 0.5% at 16.5130 an ounce. The dollar yen, 104.74. The euro's $1.1283, and the British pound, $1.2899. Boeing plans to draw down the full amount of a $13.825 billion loan as early as day after tomorrow, as the plane maker is fighting the worldwide travel disruptions from the coronavirus. Right now, Boeing is down 10.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
A story crossing the Bloomberg terminal earlier this morning. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is pressing ahead with plans to vote Thursday on an economic plan to help workers affected by the coronavirus outbreak, as President Donald Trump has yet to produce a detailed proposal that he promised on Monday. To get the latest on what's going on in the Beltway, we welcome Laura Davison, congressional tax reporter for Bloomberg News, joining us from the D.C. studio for Bloomberg. So, Laura, it's great timing to have you on here. Give us kind of an overview of kind of what type of fiscal response we may get from the government. The market is really on pins and needles waiting for this.
So yesterday, all the talk was about a payroll tax cut, and that was really met with some cool reception on the Hill, both with Democrats and Republicans. Republicans, of course, are a little bit more open to the idea. Democrats, have said that this is basically a non-starter, and really the idea that's taking hold today is the idea of delaying the April 15th tax filing deadline, so that businesses and individuals would have more time to both file their tax returns as well as pay any liability that they have due.
Laura, this boggles my mind. I'm genuinely having a hard time understanding the logic behind this, because if people delay having to pay their taxes, they still have to pay said taxes, number one. And number two, anybody who's going to be paying taxes and not necessarily getting a rebate probably is in a position to spend the money and might not need the extra help. Not to mention there are a lot of question marks. Would this do anything stimulative?
So it might. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says that this would bring about $200 billion of liquidity into the economy, and it's sort of short-term liquidity that if businesses are hard hit, they're trying to figure out what they're doing. They have a little bit more time to make those payments, and they're not paying interest on those versus they were taking out a loan. Those numbers have not been independently verified. This would really probably be more of a benefit to companies rather than to individuals. A lot of people do get refunds, and as we've seen from the numbers of people who have filed their taxes already, about a third of the tax returns that the IRS is expecting are already in. So this would really only affect, kind of the last, 2/3 to half of taxpayers, and those that you would see delay, and those that typically do delay, because the IRS already offers some ability to delay filing your return, that you still have to pay by April 15th, are the people who owe money versus those who are getting money back.
So, Laura, there's been some confusion, I think, coming out of at least the market's perceived confusion coming from the White House about a response here, about a stimulus plan. At one point, President Trump was talking about having an announcement Monday, then Tuesday. Here we are Wednesday. Well, still no credible announcement. What's the feeling within the Beltway? What's going on at the White House?
There's a lot of skepticism that there's going to be at least some sort of big tax cut as a response to this. It's very politically difficult, and also you've got a lot of economists and both economists and health experts saying that this is not going to be the thing that's going to help stem the spread of the virus. There's a lot of talk about things like paid sick leave or unemployment insurance. Those are the kind of the more measures that would be more effective in this specific crisis, essentially.
Going forward, is there a feeling that Congress will stay on the Hill after Friday and not disband and leave if they haven't come to some sort of agreement?
That's really the big question. So they have next week a regularly scheduled recess coming up. You see both in House and Senate leaders are saying that they're going to stick to the schedule that they have, though you can see that change. Really kind of how these things typically work is they kind of plant a stake in the ground, and then they stay on that until they absolutely have to either move or make a decision there. So right now they're still going home at the end of the week for a regularly scheduled recess, just be a week and then come back, though that is all subject to change, and expect to see discussion there over the next 48 hours.
So, Laura, House Speaker Pelosi is going to press ahead with plans for a vote Thursday on an economic plan. Is there any sense that this could be something that could generate bipartisan support and actually get to the president's desk?
It almost has to at this point. So really the two main players right now are Pelosi and Mnuchin, who are essentially negotiating this deal. The Senate is taking a little bit of a step back, but by nature, whatever deal that they would come out with, McConnell has essentially said that would be something that he could support and that could get to the president's desk. The question is, can they do that in such a short time frame with so many kind of high-priced things at stake?
Laura Davison, thank you so much for being with us and for the insight. Laura Davison, congressional tax reporter for Bloomberg. And I got to say, I didn't realize and it didn't really occur to me that the payroll tax would actually be the biggest benefit to companies, giving them an extra cash buffer if they were getting interrupted cash flows. That makes sense.
But still, I think, Norio Rubini from NYU on This Morning Surveillance said he also is very skeptical of that, because he says the people who really need help here, should this coronavirus continue and expand, are the folks that are in the gig economy or, maybe, unemployed, people on the margin. Well, they don't have jobs. They don't benefit from that necessarily per se.
Which goes to Marty's point, which is, yes, you can have micro measures, but there have to be a lot of them that target all of the weak spots, whether it's businesses that are smaller, that may not have the cash reserves, or if it's individuals who are in the gig economy or just work odd jobs and don't have the steady income amid all of this. Meanwhile, I'm reading a blog on the Bloomberg about all the facts about COVID-19 with doctors. Some scary.
Yeah.
Well, look, it still is a work in process, and there's so many unknowns, and that's the real fear. And the question is when they're going to come up with a vaccine or a medication. Right now, let's head down to Amy Morris in our 99.1 studios. Amy.
Thank you, Lisa. We begin with last night's primary and Joe Biden now with a commanding lead over Bernie Sanders. Biden swept to convincing victories in Missouri, Mississippi, Idaho, and Michigan. Michigan being the biggest prize of the night. Last night, Biden sounded already like a candidate who was ready to claim the nomination.
I want to thank Bernie Sanders and his supporters for their tireless energy and their passion. We share a common goal, and together, we'll defeat Donald Trump.
Meanwhile, market volatility is still high after yesterday came and went. There was no firm stimulus plan from the White House. The president had promised specifics, but he wasn't at the briefing. Economic advisor Larry Kudlow says the president still wants payroll tax relief, but Kudlow declined to answer any questions about that plan.
This will be the broad package, and at some point in the near future, we will outline a more detailed package for you.
Kudlow, meanwhile, says the administration is also working with congressional leadership. They're trying to figure out what is doable and that there will be more tax proposals later this summer or early in the fall. Pope Francis held his weekly general audience in his private library as the Vatican implements Italy's drastic coronavirus lockdown measures, barring the general public from St. Peter's Square and taking precautions to limit the spread of infections. The Pope delivered his weekly catechism lesson via live stream rather than in person. St. Peter's Square is usually filled with tens of thousands of people, but this week, the square was empty. And Harvey Weinstein has been sentenced by a judge in New York to 23 years in prison. He was found guilty of rape and a criminal sex act back in February at the end of a 6-week trial. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion or your race or because you have children or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get. So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and tune in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Everybody concerned about the coronavirus and about the supply of oil. That's causing markets to go down again today, wiping out any gain from yesterday. Treasuries are up. Investors are still waiting for details of any policy response from the Trump administration. We check those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is currently down 4%, down 115. The Dow's down 4.4%, down 1,109. The NASDAQ is down 3.7%, down 309. Let's look at the 10-year right now. It is up 430 seconds. The yield is 0.78%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 3.1% at $33.30 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.8% at $16.4720 an ounce. The dollar yen, 104.92. The euro is $1.12.66. The British pound, $1.28.91. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking, technology-driven advisory and accounting firm helping clients be in a position of strength in today's modern business landscape. Visit Witham.com to learn more. It's sort of like a game of whack-a-mole. Where do you look first? Do you look at the coronavirus, the progression of the disease, where it's spread, the fiscal response to it, or do you look at the price of oil, which is down yet again today, now $33.37 a barrel, traded on the NYMEX as the price war wages and rages on, I should say, between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Let's focus on that right now. And we're lucky to have Dr. Ariel Cohen, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, founding principal of international market analysis, and also he, of course, is a frequent contributor to this show, joining us from Washington, D.C. Can you give us a sense, Ariel, of just how long this price war can go on before we see a complete rearranging of the oil-producing nations in terms of both their economies as well as their power relative to each other?
Well, let's start with the last part of what you said. I think the rearrangement is underway. The weak players, such as Venezuela, Iran, Libya, which is in the middle of a civil war, are all going to hurt, whereas the United States shale patch, which has high production costs, really needs to re-examine its CapEx. Its CapEx is high because shale wells last only 18 months to 24 months, as opposed to conventional wells. So our production in the shale patch is somewhere between $30 and $60, whereas in Saudi Arabia it's around $10 or less. And in Russia it varies greatly, depends on a structure and a location, from $10 or $15 for established fields to as high as $65, $75 and more dollars a barrel cost in Arctic offshore continental shelf. So the ones with the longest breathing space for this war are the Saudis. On the other hand, the Saudis have also a higher balancing point for their budget. They need something like $70 a barrel price to balance their budget. So it's a very, very complicated competition. And I think at least a quarter the Saudis are trying to force the Russians to the negotiating table, as well as to force some of our shale production to shut down because they're losing money when the oil price is so low. In the worst case scenario, if the coronavirus causes a global recession, it can go 2 or 3 quarters. So hopefully, God willing, by the end of the year, at worst case scenario, or Q1 21, we will see an improvement.
So, Dr. Cohen, when this news broke that Saudi was essentially starting this price war, ramping up production, I was really shocked because I just, when I kind of did the math and thought about the near-term costs for the potential longer-term gains, i.e. weakening some of the weaker players, most notably maybe the U.S. shale business, the math just didn't seem to work. How surprised, if at all, were you about what's going on with Saudi Arabia and now Russia?
Yes, but I would say it differently. I would say the Russians were the ones who started this war. The Saudis proposed a cut, 1.5 million barrels. The Russians didn't agree to that. And Rosneft, the Russian state oil company, the behemoth, was upset because the U.S. is sanctioning them for selling Venezuela oil. There's also friction between Rosneft, the Russian national oil champion, and Saudi Arabia, competition for markets in India and Eastern Europe. So the blood between Moscow and Riyadh was bad, and the ones who fired the first shot are the Russians, keeping in mind that they are really upset that the United States managed to surpass both Russia and Saudi Arabia as being a number one producer of oil at 13 million barrels a day.
Ariel, you testify in front of Congress. You've consulted with the Senate, the House Judiciary Committees. I'm trying to understand what the U.S. response is to all of this, if anything, given the fact that Russia's aggression and, frankly, anger was really directed at the U.S. shale patch.
We can continue limit Russian ability to develop its offshore oil resources, which are quite considerable. I'll remind our listeners that the same Rosneft that destroyed the OPEC Plus agreement between Russia and Saudi was the one that several years ago did an agreement with Exxon, getting Exxon's technology to develop its offshore resources. So that's important for them. Russian oil basins are mature. They don't have a lot of new and cheap reserves to develop. Whatever is greenfield in like eastern Siberia, it's in the middle of nowhere with no infrastructure. They need new pipelines, and in the long term, they have another problem. Because of the global warming, the tundra, the permafrost, is melting, and a lot of Russian pipelines, both oil and gas, would start to sink. So that would require a huge capex. So even the Russians need oil prices. And one more thing. They said they have 6 years to sustain oil prices at $25 a barrel. Yes, they have reserves. They have $125 billion in the National Oil Fund and whatnot. But I do not believe for a moment that this low oil prices, let's say 25 to 30, will sustain itself for more than 1 year.
Dr. Ariel Cohen, thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate your perspective on global markets. Dr. Ariel Cohen, he's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, also founding principal of international market analysis based in Washington, D.C. Here, a quick check of markets, still kind of near the lows of the day. S&P down about 3.9%. That's 113 points. Dow down 4.3% at 1,090 points. That's at 23,925. And NASDAQ down 3.6%. That's 300 points. Looking at the oil right here, WTI crude, $33.22 a barrel. That's off $1.15 or 3.4% today, so no floor there for risk assets, including the commodities. Looking at the yen, that's kind of where you would expect to see some improvement as a little flight to quality, and the yen is up today. Gold also up just slightly. Not much was up earlier, a little bit more. So again, a flight to quality. Coming up, the balance of power with David Weston. He will push the conversation forward. Alongside Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, later, yeah.
So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need Free Now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a Free Now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free Now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Stace, are you ready yet? Have you seen the Butlins lineup? I was born ready. We're going big tonight. Raxu then Brainiac live.
Those experiments will blow the boys' socks off.
They're wearing flip-flops, Joe, not socks.
Oh, dance shoes tomorrow though for the Diversity Dance Academy. I am going to throw some shapes.
Are you sure about that?
Well, it's a lot easier when you're not on ice.
Well, if anyone could teach you to dance, it's going to be Diversity. Come on, we're going to be late.
For an exciting family break to Butlins this Easter, book online now. Are you ready to Butlins?
capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Bay Area Business Times 8:59. It's time to take a look at what's going on in the markets, which have been downcast for the past, since the opening this morning because of the coronavirus and also because of what's going on in oil markets. We check those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is down 3.7%, down 105. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down over 4%, down 1,020. And the NASDAQ is down 3.4%, down 287. Let's take a look at the 10-year. Right now, the 10-year is up 230. Make that 132nd with a yield of just about 0.79%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 3.3% at 33.22 a barrel, while COMEX gold is down 0.6% at 16.4980 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 104.83. The euro is $1.1279. The British pound $1.2887. Look at a couple of stocks of note. Tesla is down 6.9%. Apple is down 8.3%. Netflix is down 6.3%. Google, Alphabet, is down 3.8%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now it's time for Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We need an economy that works for everybody.
I am the one who has the broadest coalition.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
These lawyers brought the case, and in my view, they should be sanctioned. We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world. Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
The coronavirus continues to hit U.S. markets. The United Kingdom comes up with a coordinated response, and Vice President Biden takes a big step toward the nomination for president. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to Balance of Power. The country continues to wait for the fiscal stimulus plan that President Trump has promised, with conflicting reports about what it may contain and when we may get it. Jim Messina served as Deputy Chief of Staff for President Barack Obama, as well as his campaign manager for re-election. Welcome now to Bloomberg Radio. So, Jim, thanks for staying with us. You were on television before we were talking about the primaries, but let's talk about crisis in the White House. I mean, you were there. You had your share. What is it like when you're in the White House and you have to pull the right people together and make the right decisions quickly?
Yeah, what you realize when you're in the White House is every single day something breaks in government. It only gets to the White House if it's bad enough that no one else could fix it. And I remember, I can't remember whether it was the BP oil spill or something else, but Vice President Biden at the time came into my office and said, "What's next? Pestilence?" Like, literally, we just seem to have, we had the pirates at one point, et cetera. Right. And you go through those and a couple things matter. The guy at the top really matters. We were the no drama Obama White House. And when there was panic, we all took our cues from the president, who was a pretty cool character and didn't get too rattled. The second thing is, Rahm Emanuel famously said, "Never let a crisis go to waste." And at crisis times, it's always the ability for the president to exercise leadership and to say to the country, "I'm the guy who's in charge of this and we'll all be okay." And I think that's what the country and the market is waiting to hear from President Trump.
So how do you deal with the fact that you can never have all the information you want before you need to make a decision? How do you strike the right balance between moving fast enough but not moving too fast, getting as much information as you can get, but being willing to make a decision, say, "I don't know it all, but I know enough"?
Yeah, when you really look at this stuff, there's a great Harvard Business School study about, sometimes it doesn't even matter which decision you make, just you need to make one. And in times of crisis like that, you have to get all the bright people, all the best minds in government together to give recommendations. But then it's up to you to make a decision and then implement that decision across government. What every president complains about is they have this huge bureaucracy below them that understands they're going to be there way after this president's gone, and takes real leadership to get the bureaucracy to actually move forward, especially in times of crisis. We saw that in the Obama administration during the healthcare.gov crisis, and it was really hard to solve some of those problems because you had an entrenched bureaucracy that didn't really care what you said.
How much can you delegate?
delegate? I mean, President Trump right now apparently has delegated really to Mike Pence, the vice president, the lead position. Now, the vice president has brought some other people in around him who know this stuff terribly well. But can you delegate to somebody like a vice president responsibility for really putting together a response?
Yeah, I think it was actually smart of President Trump to delegate to the vice president. You know, we delegated the entire Recovery Act of Biden, and Biden really ran it because the president of the United States has to deal with all the other things going on. And, you know, process in the White House becomes incredibly important. Who's in the meetings? What are we doing? What decisions do we got to make? How do we move forward? And the president's just too busy to make a bunch of those, and having the vice president, who isn't constrained by the problems of the day, really focus on this, I think, is a wise move. Now, the president still needs to have a really clear message to the American public, and that's something the vice president can't do. The country really does want the president to say, hey, it's going to be okay.
When you talk about managing a process, it makes me think at least about the chief of staff position, which is terribly important. But who gets to talk to the president, who doesn't, what information does he see, what does he not? We have a new chief of staff right now, so there's not a continuity right now. The acting chief of staff, Mulvaney, has been almost unceremoniously shown the exit.
Sent to Northern Ireland, right? That's
exactly. He's our envoy to Northern Ireland, exactly right. And we have Mr. Meadows now back in. How much of a risk is that to sort of change horses in midstream?
I think it's a big risk, especially in the middle of a re-election campaign, right? Mm-hmm. Meadows is the fourth chief of staff in 4 years. And more importantly, I think the problem he's going to figure out is he's never worked in the administrative branch. He's a member of Congress. And you know, a lot of the things the chief of staff does is really, to your point, run process, figure out how to get decisions made, who's in the room, who's not in the room, who sees the president, who doesn't see the president. And you get in there and realize having some experience was super helpful. Obama's chief of staff when I was there was Rahm Emanuel, who'd served in the Clinton White House, understood how to use power, understood the trade-offs. And that was really, really helpful to a young president who'd never, you know, been in an executive role before. And I think, you know, Congressman Meadows is very clearly accomplished. Going to walk into that job having the complete trust of the president, as did the previous three chiefs of staff. And I think the broader challenge is going to be, can you get Donald Trump to actually be part of a process? So far, the first three chiefs of staff have failed.
What about the broader team that he has around him? Mr. Fauci, Dr. Fauci from NIH has really stepped up here. It's clear that they are giving him a prominent role. Alex Azar came out of actually the pharmaceutical industry. He knows something about the healthcare industry. Does he have people around him that can really step up and understand the science of it, as well as the politics?
Look, in my time of government, there's not many leaders who are more respected than Tony Fauci. You know, he's served, I think, 7 presidents, bipartisan, works well with both parties, is an honest broker of the science, has no problem understanding the White House is going to be the lead on a bunch of communications part of this. If they just get out of the way and let Fauci do his job, he will be very, very good in this. And I don't know, Azar, but what you realize in these moments of crisis is you just need people the president trusts and who can be part of a process to make quick decisions. And we'll be able to see going forward whether Azar is a piece of that puzzle. But I promise you, Tony Fauci is.
Whenever there's a crisis, messaging is terribly important. But certainly I think this has got to be right at the very top. When you're really worried about people panicking about what's going on, knowing about their personal livelihood, the well-being of their loved ones. This is pretty personal stuff. How do you get your arms around the messaging? You've got a lot of people who can say various things, whether on the record or off the record. You don't want to be contradicting yourself.
Yeah, I mean, here's the two problems Trump has. This is all occurring in the middle of his re-election campaign, right? So he needs to both message it's all going to be okay from a health perspective, and then he's going to be incredibly sensitive to anything that's going to damage the market and the economy, because in the middle of this, he can't take a recession because so far his superpower has been this great economy, and it's been able to sustain him politically through everything he's gone through, including an impeachment process. If that were to change, and we're kind of seeing that happen right now, then I think he's got real problems. And what you realize is that you need a combined response across governments, because you and I just talked about HHS, CDC, Treasury has a role here, and that's why putting the vice president in charge of all of those things makes sense. But the president has to participate in the messaging too, and you and I were talking on TV that, he said like drastically different things from day to day about whether you should be worried, whether you shouldn't be worried, and, eventually they've just got to decide what the narrative is and say it over and over again.
And then finally, quickly, just dispel one perhaps wives' tale. The clock, he's running against the clock, and it's not necessarily the November clock. As I understand, second quarter disposable income really affects an election in November.
Yeah, when you ran a presidential reelection campaign as I did, you spent a lot of time looking at the numbers, and you had Larry Summers on your TV show this morning, and he ran this whole study for me showing that the second quarter numbers are the most determinative of where the economy is in the election, and that's kind of where voters' feelings are baked in. Right. And, this is happening at exactly the wrong moment for Donald Trump.
So the president may be up against it. Okay, many thanks to Jim Messina. He's the founder and CEO of the Messina Group. Always a treat to have Jim with us. Coming up, oil markets are in an uproar from the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. Robert D. Kaplan of the Eurasia Group is here to lay it all out for us. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Virus-caused turmoil continues to rattle global financial markets as more news comes in on the coronavirus. For example, the D.C. Health Department has just recommended canceling all mass gatherings. Markets do react when that kind of news comes through. Stocks are plunging more than 4%. Investors are still waiting for the Trump administration to bring them some sort of policy response. Long-dated treasuries have erased their gains. The S&P is close to wiping out yesterday's surge. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is now down 3.2%, down 93, a little better than it was earlier. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 3.7%, down 917, also marginally better. And the NASDAQ is down over 3%, down 254. The 10-year is currently up 230 seconds with a yield of 0.79%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 3% at 33.33 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.75% at 1647.80. The dollar yen is at 104.97. The euro is $1.1264, and the British pound $1.28.79. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Bloomberg Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks so much, Greg Jarrett. From the Interactive Brokers Studio, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. Oil-producing nations around the world are reeling from the plummeting oil prices, and that certainly includes Iran, which already was struggling under U.S. sanctions and a virulent outbreak of the coronavirus. Welcome now, Robert D. Kaplan. He's Managing Director of the Eurasia Group. So, Robert, thank you so very much for staying with us. We talked on TV about what's going on with coronavirus in Iran. Tell us what's going on with oil and what that's doing potentially to the regime there.
What's going on with oil is one of the many second and third order geopolitical order effects that we'll be seeing over the coming months from the coronavirus. Initially, oil prices were significantly depressed because of the outbreak of the virus, and that led Russia and Saudi Arabia to have furious discussions about it. What happened was a kind a case of failed brinkmanship, where neither side could agree, and the Saudis have decided to pump and pump and pump and lower the price, and so there's a price war between Vladimir Putin and the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And one of the aims in this, especially on the Russian side, David, is to hurt U.S. shale producers, not to allow them to have more market share. It's all about the U.S. shale industry, which Putin wants to hurt as much as possible, even if it means less money coming into his budgetary coffers. And he also wants to demonstrate to the Saudis that they cannot rely as much as they used to on United States support. So the result is the coronavirus, through a series of indirect measures, has led to a collapse in hydrocarbon prices. And we'll be seeing other second and third order effects. I mean, this is going to hurt oil producing countries, not only Iran, it's going to hurt Nigeria, it's going to hurt Venezuela, Maduro's regime, and on and on.
So we hear about a fiscal break-even price for Russia and for Saudi Arabia, and are told actually the fiscal break-even price for Saudi Arabia is higher. That is to say, how much do they need oil to cost in order for them to meet their fiscal obligations on their budget? How does this work with Iran? I mean, what does this do to their budget internally? As I say, they're already under a lot of stress from sanctions.
Yes, well, the Iranian regime does produce things more than just oil and gas, but not that much. It's mainly an oil-gas economy. So when you layer on top of it the impact to the budget because of dramatically lower hydrocarbon prices, and then you interact that with the sanctions, and then with just bad economic management in general, what we're going to see is last year the Iranian economy, David, contracted by 9.7%.
Wow.
Going forward over the next year, it was projected to contract another 2.7%, but that was before the coronavirus scare hit. So we're dealing with a government that was enormously unpopular to begin with, that's seeing an economic contraction, that we haven't seen in any major country.
So, Robert, you deal with geopolitics on a much broader scale than just Iran. Who benefits from this? Is it the Indias of this world who are net oil importers, and so they can afford oil in a way that they couldn't a year or two ago?
A number of things. First of all, the Chinese are net oil importers. So indirectly, this price war is going to ease some of the burden on them, which they desperately need because of the impact of the coronavirus on the Chinese economy, is really stalling out their growth. And so this will provide a little bit of a side benefit to them. I think U.S. shale production is far more resilient than maybe President Putin in Russia gives it credit for. So I don't see U.S. shale production collapsing. It will contract a bit, but it can get ramped up very quickly when we do have an economic resurgence. But certainly it's a slight benefit to China. It's a benefit for all net oil and gas importing countries.
So the oil, come back to shale in the United States for a moment, the oil's still in the ground. You can get it out. You can get it out fairly cheaply. So it may not affect over the longer term the production from shale. It may well affect who's producing it, because a lot of those shale producers are highly leveraged, and I'm not sure whether they can make it or not.
Yeah, and another thing is, in that field, you need to have constant investment in infrastructure, in capital equipment, and and you make it on the other end when you actually sell the shale oil or natural gas. And so, given that they have constant money that they need to pour in for capital investment, they're entering a very difficult period unless Russia and Saudi Arabia come to an agreement. If the pain gets too burdensome in Russia or Saudi Arabia, you may see renewed negotiations to come to some sort of a deal.
So I certainly don't know what's in the mind of President Putin of Russia or of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. You may, I don't know, but is it possible what we're watching really is a very public negotiation?
It's possible, of course. Remember, one thing about President Putin of Russia, he's not impulsive. He thinks 5 steps ahead. He seems to be impulsive because he's very daring and quick to take opportunities when they arrive, but he is not irresponsible. This could be a case of a public discussion that will then go private again. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, has demonstrated really impulsive behavior without thinking several steps ahead, like when he invaded Yemen, like when he initiated that dispute with Qatar, neither of which have turned out well, or when he was involved in the assassination of the Washington Post journalist Khashoggi.
So give us a little bit of history here at the end here. We've had oil shocks up and down in the past. Does it have a permanent or a longer lasting effect on geopolitics?
Well, the way to look at an oil shock is that we are in a transition to cleaner energy forms. I don't just mean wind and solar. I also mean natural gas, which is actually a cleaner energy than oil. And so natural gas is the bridging fuel to a cleaner energy future. So if prices are depressed for a significant period of time, this will probably accelerate the change to cleaner forms of energy.
So we could have longer-term transformational effect in the energy industry. Could.
Yeah. I think that this virus is going to have a longer-term transformational effect on a lot of things.
Yeah, fascinating. And what does this do to Europe?
Well, actually, Europe has been, as you've just had on Bloomberg TV, I've just been watching. Europe is handling this crisis much better than the United States, because Europe may be beset by populists, but the European Union, the new group of leaders of the EU, are all high expert managers, who are moderate centrists who believe in Europe, and they have been coordinating responses. The Bank of England has come through. We need this in the U.S.
They also had the experience of 2008, a lot of those people. Okay, thanks so much to Robert D. Kaplan of the Eurasia Group. Coming up here, Bloomberg economist Yelena Shiryatova is here to take us through the latest economic numbers, what they may indicate about coronavirus or not. That's coming up next on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, later, yeah.
So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
Yeah, so I want to upgrade to the latest phone you got. Okay. All right. But for an unbelievably good price. Yeah? And I want it where I could choose the length for my own contract. Yeah!
On O2, you're our headline act, which is why you can get the phone you want for less per month with a custom plan on O2.
Minimum upfront cost, direct-only device plan of 3 to 36 months. Refresh credit by Telefonica UK Limited. Terms apply.
The government has coordinated and streamlined its coronavirus messaging, but is it the right message?
What's really necessary is for the people in the government who don't know the details to stop telling us things like there will be a vaccine in 1 year. Stop it. That's not helpful.
Making sense of the noise and the silence on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
To Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
U.S. CPI numbers out today surprised the upside a bit, but that's before the full effects of the coronavirus have been felt. To give us a read on the state of the U.S. economy, welcome now Yelena Shaliatova. She is U.S. economist for Bloomberg. Yelena, always great to have you with us. What do we make of the CPI numbers? Because it doesn't really incorporate much of the coronavirus.
Nothing, really. So this is an outdated number, although it already started showing some little pockets of the impact from the coronavirus. So we saw a decline in prices in recreation services. We saw airline prices decline. So that was pretty obvious that it would happen. We will see much more of that in the March number. So that was a February number. We're going to see much of this in the March number when goods prices, ironically, will go up. But if you just think about the supply impact, shortage of supply will boost prices for medical commodities, personal commodities such as hand sanitizers and things like that, which we already see anecdotal evidence everywhere. We know that Amazon, prices for hand sanitizers, for example, are really going up.
But on the other hand, if the demand goes down, that pushes prices down. So you might have some prices go down even as some other prices go up.
But that we will see mostly in services. So things like airline tickets, recreation again, vacation, all of these things will go down, as you said.
So what are you looking at, really? What's the first indicator you're looking for of what's really going on in the economy?
So I think what will really matter, and this will be like the first big indicator to watch, is consumer sentiment from the University of Michigan, which is coming out this Friday at 10 o'clock. So sentiment used to, we saw big declines in sentiment over events such as September 11th and the debt ceiling crisis and things like that. This will probably see another big decline. And looking at the magnitude of that, we will make assumptions of what is going to happen to consumer spending.
Fascinating. And then we have the Fed next week.
Then we have the Fed next.
If they wait that long, you can't tell anymore with the Fed, right?
Right. So they're in the quiet period right now, so the blackout period for communication. So what usually happened after an emergency action, the Fed cut rates further. For example, during the financial crisis, there were a few emergency meetings when they cut the discount rate, and then it was followed by action on policy rates at the scheduled meeting. So if the history is any guide, we will see further action, but at this point it seems like quite for sure we will see that.
A lot coming up, just not quite yet. Okay, many thanks to Bloomberg's Yelena Shaliatova. Coming up here, Renee Haugerud of Galtair is here to give us a read on investing in a turbulent oil market. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It's another day in another direction for Wall Street. U.S. stocks are falling over 3.5% as investors wait to hear what President Trump plans to do to fight the economic impact of the coronavirus. The Dow is down 991 points, S&P down 106, NASDAQ dropping 275 points. Well, the actual cost of the coronavirus is pretty high. The Global Business Travel Association puts the revenue losses for global business travel this year at $820 billion. And COVID-19 could mean fewer car shoppers out kicking the tires. Morgan Stanley's auto analyst is predicting a 9% drop in auto sales this year. In other news, soda sales are going flat, so Pepsi is buying the energy drink maker Rockstar for nearly $4 billion. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step. from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Revisions, return policies. There are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, oil prices fall again today. Renee Haugerud of Galtair joins us to talk about the view from the investment side. But first, let's get a market check with Greg Jarrett.
Yes, I am here for you. We do have markets continuing to go down, and we just got word from the World Health Organization that they're declaring this a pandemic. Let's see how that's affecting markets as we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is down 3.5%, down 103. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 4%, down 1,005. And the NASDAQ is down 3.25%, down 272. The 10-year is currently down 1/32 with a yield of 0.80%. West Texas Intermediate Crude is down 2.8% at 33.40 a barrel. COMEX Gold is down 0.7% at 1648.70 per ounce. The dollar yen is at 104.98. The euro is $1.1275, and the British pound $1.2873. Let's look at a couple of stocks out there. The Ford stock is down 3.3% right now. GM is down 2.25%. The Gap stores are down 7.5%. Apple is down 2.4%. Wells Fargo is down 5.3%. That's Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Balance of Power with David Weston.
Thanks so much, Greg Jarrett. Oil has been in free fall since the OPEC Plus deal fell apart, with Russia and Saudi Arabia rushing to see who can cut prices faster and increase production more. Energy companies have been hit particularly hard, of course, and we welcome now Renee Haugerud, founder and CIO of Galtair, to give us a view on what an investor is to make of it all. So, Renee, thank you so much for joining us. We hear a lot about the real pressure being brought to bear on the shale producers. Is that where really it's being felt the most at the moment?
Yes, and thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be on. It is a very tumultuous market right now, and it really is. It's the shale producers. There's a lot of pressure on them. They were already coming into this year having to cut CapEx, break-evens, difficult to maintain, and they're coming up for a round of new loans. And I think some of the smaller Permian and smaller shale, the majors are going to make it through this, but the smaller guys and independents are going to be in real trouble.
They were leveraged, a lot of them pretty highly, and a lot of it high yield, pretty expensive debt at the same time. Is that inherent in the shale business that you have to keep investing CapEx?
Yes, it is, and in particular, it also made it really attractive for markets that sought high yield and thought the shale boom and the oil prices rises and the economic growth was going to go on forever in the Permian. And as with all things, trends do come to an end.
So as you pointed out, people were throwing money at all sorts of projects, but specifically shale, which kept the spreads down. So it wasn't very expensive compared to investment grade, much less treasury for that matter. Has that blown out at this point? And so when you have to go in and refinance, is it really, really hurting?
It hasn't blown out completely yet, but at this point, who knows if they'll get the credit they need. Now we're getting into such a level that with the levels that they're at, the banks might withdraw lending. Now, we did hear that several of the shale producers and independents have been approaching the White House and looking to be involved in the packages, i.e. like Boeing today. I mean, they're going to draw down $13.82 billion in a loan.
Yeah, you can sort of get in line right now for the people at the White House looking for some help, right?
Right. So I think they're going to have a parade of people looking for help. Yep. And I don't think it's a matter of rates right now. It's a matter if they will get the financing. And we think that there's going to be quite a few bankruptcies in the independents. Yeah. Even the earnings. If you look at a lot of the shale drillers and this year compared to last year, companies that were making 60, 90 million, 150 million were flat, -3. Not disastrous losses, but a huge change from 2018 to end of 2019.
The markets are cruel, and as a practical matter, one person's problem is another person's opportunity. When you say that there will be bankruptcies, does that mean that some others, maybe the majors, can come in and have some bargains, buy some of this up?
That's exactly right. And we do expect that, probably more towards the end of the year than right now. I think there will be a lot of, machinations and negotiations, and depending upon what crude oil does. Now, our view is that this is going to last a little longer than short term, and it's coupled with our equity view. We're a macro commodity investment fund, and so we look at the big picture as well, and we think the coronavirus topping out on the economy, we think that the coronavirus in the short term is underestimated and that it will take a bit longer to work through this than it's not going to be a nothing burger, as some pundits have talked about recently.
A year can be forever in this business, no doubt about it. But as a practical matter, the oil is still going to be in the ground, and all the technology got developed to get the oil out of the ground at reasonable prices will still be there. So on the longer term, will there be a real curtailment of shale production, which is what we're told Russia may be interested in?
Longer term, we think the entire energy sector is slowly, bit by bit at the margins, being affected by alternative energy and will continue to be. So yes, long term, we view the entire commodity market right now as a major opportunity, but in the short term, you can't pick a falling knife. And so in the long term, we believe it will continue, though depending upon who gets in the White House, if fracking is curtailed, if fracking is curtailed, it's going to be on federal lands at first. Could it be on public lands too? Then the price of nat gas will go up. And it's funny, the sweet spot in all of this is natural gas. That's the thing that I'm most constructive on, because natural gas prices have been depressed significantly because of all the associated gas, because of the higher oil prices. So as we see oil go down, the associated gas supply will go down significantly, and we think with nat gas having been kind of under the cost of production, that actually the price of nat gas is one of the sweet spots in this contagion, so to speak.
So, Renee, we're called Balance of Power because we like to talk about governments, what governments do or don't do. You talked earlier about the shale producers maybe lining up at the White House for some help. What about a different kind of help? Back in '86, I've read about this. Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush went to the Saudis and said, "You're going too far low on the price of oil. You got to get it back up to help save the U.S. Energy production business." Is there any prospect of that? If President Trump picking up the phone to his good friend Mohammed bin Salman and saying, "Enough's enough, buddy"?
I think we've gone past that point in the short term. Later this year, when it becomes more clear, if the current incumbent gets in again, or whoever the new president is, if he doesn't. But I don't foresee. I think I think this plays out for at least another quarter. I don't see an emergency meeting, and because this goes beyond just the U.S. and Saudi. It's Saudi, it's Russia, the OPEC meeting, and where the ministers there are some personal issues that didn't get worked out, and we think this is going to play out for a while. We don't believe there's going to be an emergency meeting and an OPEC Plus getting back together.
And
that could happen later this year.
And in fairness, President Trump has been very outspoken in his liking low gasoline prices in particular, which is tied to oil. And on the other hand, George Herbert Walker Bush did come from Houston. So he was from those people, so it's understandable why he may get that a little bit more clearly than President Trump. Well, thank you so much, Renee. It's really good to have you with us. That's Renee Hogarud of Galtair. Coming up here, we hear a lot about testing for the coronavirus. We're going to talk with a fascinating journalist who has actually gone through the process here in New York, and it's a pretty harrowing story of fits and starts and ups and downs when she thought she might well have the coronavirus and she just couldn't get tested. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
We've all been in one, but how much do you really know about black cabs? For instance, did you know that a black cab has to be tall enough to accommodate an individual wearing a bowler hat? That's a lot of space for you and your briefcase. Or that Free Now drivers can use the bus lanes, the perfect getaway to make your meeting in time. And with 2-minute central London pickups, you needn't waste time searching for a taxi. Just download the Free Now app today and take the hassle out of getting round London.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks take another leg down as the World Health Organization declares the coronavirus outbreak is a pandemic, saying cases outside China have risen 13-fold. The U.S. top infectious disease specialist has now told lawmakers the pathogen is 10 times more deadly than the seasonal flu. As I say on this news, global financial markets have gone down. Investors are speculating on the timing and size of any government stimulus or reaction in response to this news. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is now down just about 4%, down 113. The Dow is down 4.4%, down 1,109. And the NASDAQ is down 3.6%, down 302. The 10-year is up 132nd with a yield of 0.79%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 2.9% at $33.37 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.8% at $16.4740 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 104.80. The euro $1.1274. And the British pound $1.2864. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks so much to Greg Jarrett. Interactive Broker Studio. This is Balance of Power, as Greg says, and I am David Weston. HHS Secretary Azar yesterday said that they're ramping up production of coronavirus test kits, and that at this point, all doctors should have what they need for the people who need to get tested. But the process is not an easy or straightforward one, and that's what Robin Schulman learned for herself when she had to get tested. We welcome her now to report on her experience. So, Robin, thank you so much for joining us. I've read the piece you wrote in the New York Times, and it's rather harrowing, actually. Why did you start at the beginning? Why did you think you needed to get tested in the first place?
Well, I came down with a cough, and I started to have a little bit of trouble breathing, as though I had a bit of asthma or something. I was out of breath walking down the street. And probably in other circumstances, I wouldn't have even been concerned, but a couple of days prior to that, I had gone on a quick trip from New York to Toronto, and in the Toronto airport, I landed in the same section as a flight that had just arrived from Shanghai. And so I passed through immigration, touching the same touch screens with people who had just come.
Sorry, do we still have Robin? Have we lost Robin? So we've lost Robin Schulman. I hope that we can get her back on, because she started out the story there where she came back through Toronto, and she was only there for 24 hours, actually, it turns out. But there had been people there from Shanghai, and later on she found out a couple of those people had been diagnosed with the coronavirus. And so she actually went into the healthcare system here. She went to a doctor. She was feeling worse. She had a fever. She was short of breath. And they ultimately decided that she probably should get tested, but she had to go to the hospital, got very inconsistent treatment, I think it's fair to say. Some people would shake her hands, doctors would shake her hands, other people had masks on and were all garbed up with various paraphernalia to protect themselves. And it really gave you the sense that we don't yet have a protocol worked out. And this is New York City, after all, a fairly sophisticated place, we like to think, but we didn't have a protocol that was even reasonably consistent for treating people who were proclaiming that they might have coronavirus and had some symptoms that would suggest that that might be the case. So she actually has gone through the experience, even though we keep hearing from Mr. Azar, the Secretary of HHS, that effectively was all right. Now I'm told we have Robin Schulman back on the phone. Robin, I've been doing a bad job of trying to summarize your experience, but please take us through it. You were saying you were short of breath. You'd come through Toronto. There had been people from Shanghai who later, I believe, were diagnosed, a couple of them, with coronavirus. So you concluded that you ought to get tested. What did you do?
I called the state coronavirus hotline and asked what I should do, and I was advised, given my history, I should go to the ER and call ahead. So that I did that. I called to the ER, and again, the person asked questions about my history. And I mentioned that 2 people who had been in the airport on the days I had been to Toronto had tested positive for coronavirus. And so she told me to come into the ER. I did that. But, it turned out that the ER probably wasn't the right place for me to be. They didn't have, it only came out much later, but they didn't have sufficient tests. And so they had very narrow criteria for who could be tested. And essentially, if you had not traveled to China or Italy or Iran, the places where coronavirus has hit most people, you were not eligible for testing at the hospital. So the doctor basically told me I didn't have the virus, I was low risk, and I shouldn't worry about it, and I should just go home and nurse my cold. And if I felt sick, I should stay home. If I felt well, I should go out, and I shouldn't worry about sending my children to school or my husband to work. We should just proceed as normal.
Did you have, Robin, a sense that this was a protocol, that the way you were being treated was consistent with other people? Because, let's be honest, and we heard this actually from Secretary Azar of HHS yesterday, we can't test everybody in the country. We're not going to test 300 million people. So the question is, how do you decide who to test, who not to test? But in that circumstance, at least you want some consistent rules and regulations.
Yeah, it just wasn't entirely clear to me. The doctor I spoke with told me that it was the hospital policy, and it wasn't clear to me whether it was the hospital or the City Department of Health making that policy, or even the CDC. At the time, I didn't know that there was such an enormous shortage of tests. But,
how long did this go on?
Even an hour to hour and day to day, it was changing. But even the doctor said, things are changing.
How long did this go on? Are you all right?
Yeah, I've just had this cough.
So it's not gone away. The cough has not gone away.
No, I'm still actually sick with the same symptoms I started out with. I came home that night, and I was feeling a little bit relieved that the doctor had told me not to worry about it, and I could just focus on eating chicken soup and not spreading an epidemic. But my 6-year-old son that night was sobbing as I put him to bed, and he seemed flushed, and I took his temperature and realized that he had a fever too. And so then I started to get really worried, because I had asked my mother to take my son to an appointment that day because I was sick, and she's 76 years old with respiratory problems, so she's the prime demographic who's vulnerable to this. And I was just enraged at the idea that I might have exposed her without knowing through her care for my son, because I had been told by a doctor who hadn't tested me that I didn't have the virus. So later that evening, Mike Pence made the announcement that testing would be available to any American, and I decided I wanted to try again to get tested.
Did you ever get tested?
I did. I was eventually...
and were you negative?
Later able to get tested, and I was negative, yeah.
Well, that's good news, finally, right? Yeah. Although you still have this cough, you still got the problem, right?
Yeah, I've had a fever now for 12 days, and I still have the cough, so I don't know what's up, but it's not coronavirus.
Well, I guess it's good it's not coronavirus, but it's not good not to know exactly what might have gone on. Okay, well, we really want to thank you very much. That's Robin Schulman. She's a freelance journalist who had a rather harrowing experience with the coronavirus and the attempts to try to get tested. And now we're going to bring in Kriti Gupta. She's from the Bloomberg Markets Live team, because we have been watching markets all day long, and the equities are down, something like 3.5–4% last time I checked. And oil is down as well, although the 10-year doesn't seem to be moving as much. Where are we, Kriti?
That's right. It looks like the Treasury market is fascinating right now, because what we should be seeing traditionally is that haven bid, right, in Treasuries. That's the traditional thing to be looking at when we see 4% declines in the stock market. And yet, I believe intraday we're actually not seeing that haven bid. We're about flat on the day. So what that tells you is that actually this move into Treasuries here is quite driven by the lack of liquidity in the stock market. So people are actually turning into Treasuries to kind of get in and out of the market, and that's why you're seeing volatility actually in the Treasury market really spike here.
Yeah, and actually gold is off a bit. So
it is.
You would normally see a haven bid going into gold, another alternative here, and it's actually off a little bit.
It absolutely is, and I think something to keep in mind though is, like, as we see this volatility here and this lack of liquidity, the arbitrage opportunities are going to be really huge. So when you're actually looking at these intraday charts across asset classes, really keep in mind that it's not really a straight direction up. It goes up and down. There's some choppiness in the markets.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say.
To say the least, right? But even some choppiness in the markets, and even with that, we're still seeing as much as 4% declines.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been at times today it was not nearly that bad, but I'm looking at it right now. Dow's down 4.77, S&P's down 4.3%. So it's turning into a pretty rocky day after yesterday with some hope.
That's right. And it is interesting because we're seeing two kind of different narratives. Traditionally, we'll see stocks in the U.S. follow Europe's lead, and now divergence in the fiscal and economic stimulus picture is changing that.
Kriti, thank you so very much. That's Kriti Gupta. She's from our Bloomberg Markets Live team. Coming up, we're going to talk with June Grasso about what she's going to be taking a look at in the legal area. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Have you ever...
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, later, yeah.
So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
Yeah, so I want to upgrade to the latest phone you got. Okay. All right. But for an unbelievably good price. Yeah. And I want it where I could choose the length for my own contract. Yeah.
On O2, you're our headline act, which is why you can get the phone you want for less per month with a custom plan on O2.
Minimum upfront cost, direct only, device plan of 3 to 36 months, refresh credit by Telefonica UK Limited, terms apply.
The Mona Lisa is only 30 inches tall. The world's hottest chili, 1 inch. And Napoleon, taller than a Great Dane, but only by 71 centimetres. Who says small can't make an impact? The Peugeot 108 Allure is now available for just $159 per month, with $159 initial rental. Our small but mighty car that doesn't have to cost you a small fortune. Peugeot Motor Company PLC, a credit broker not a lender, will introduce you to PSA Finance UK Limited. Personal finance lease, 48 months at $159, 18 plus, guarantee may be required. Terms, eligibility and return conditions apply. You will not own the car.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
This is Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Interactive Brokers Studio, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. We're back now with Kriti Gupta from the Bloomberg Markets Live team to talk about these markets. And we've been talking about the fact that equities are off quite a bit now. I don't know if this is at the lows, but it looks to be close to the lows of the day, I think. At the same time that there isn't the rush into treasuries at this point. So people want to get out of stocks. They don't necessarily want to get into bonds.
That's right. And once again, we were just talking about this before the break. Liquidity is really what you want to be watching here. And this is coming especially in a time not just with volatility, but when you're actually seeing traders move physically out of the trading floor, being limited down to one screen or even a laptop. You do not want to be caught in that position. So liquidity is
so much
really
for this remote trading stuff from your living room, huh?
I mean, it's challenging.
Sounds good on paper.
It does. I mean, it sounds great to sit on your couch. It's challenging just covering these markets with 4 screens at my disposal. Imagine trading it with just one.
But are we seeing similar problems in Europe, for example? Or is it going better in Europe? I mean, we have a different situation with respect to the governments, where we have Christine Lagarde saying we're going to really step in big time. We had the BOE make a cut together with the budget that came out.
That's right, and we're also seeing some comments out of Germany as well that fiscal stimulus is still very much on the table. We were going back and forth there. We are seeing the ECB, of course, also talk about that as well. Here on the across the ocean here in the States, seeing some kind of hesitation a little bit to really get a concrete plan out, and then after that,
it's not a hesitation. They just don't have one.
Well,
there's a difference.
Working on it, quantifying it, really trying to get kind of an impact as quickly as possible. Whereas in Europe, you're seeing a little bit more of some definitive action. That being said, you are still seeing European stocks end the day relatively lower, but certainly not by the margin that we're seeing here in the U.S.
What kind of volume are we seeing?
Volume is high right now across asset classes. Like I said, volatility is still the name of the game. What you really want to keep an eye on, though, is the volatility within Treasuries, hesitating here. But Treasuries, really, as we're seeing some Fed stimulus, as we're seeing some of those cuts get priced in, the key thing to keep is volatility across asset classes.
Okay, thank you so much, Kriti Gupta. I really appreciate you stepping in here on Bloomberg Markets Live team. That's terrific on the markets. And now it's the magic time when we find out what's coming up next hour with June Grasso, my colleague, who is, of course, among other things, the anchor of Bloomberg Law. So, June, what are you looking at?
Well, of course, we're looking at the Harvey Weinstein sentence.
How about that?
Morning.
23 years?
That was such a harsh sentence that it drew audible gasps in the courtroom. And one of his attorneys said the sentence was 3 times as long as this judge had given a man convicted of first-degree rape who also drugged a female employee.
Wow.
So that is going to be our first topic. Then, the director of the CDC yesterday disputed President Trump's current claim that building the wall will help contain the coronavirus. So we're also going to be talking about the Ninth Circuit arguments on the wall. Remember that the president diverted Pentagon funds and is doing it again. He's being sued again on the same issue. Now, there was a victory for House Democrats. They are getting some of the grand jury materials that are behind the Mueller report now.
Unredacted, right? They're going to get the full thing. Yes,
and with the judge saying that it's based on an impeachment inquiry and the Democrats saying that they are still inquiring about it. So that's going to be interesting because it's the exact opposite of what another court, the same D.C. Circuit, ruled about 11 days ago. Not based on grand jury materials. They said the court can't interfere between the federal, the executive branch, and Congress. So we'll have to see if there's enough of a difference there.
Well, and as you know so well, June, in my experience, grand jury material is pretty sacred stuff. That's 6E material. You never breach that. So that's a pretty big deal.
It is, but they used the Nixon case as an example of a case where they said, in fact, that what the judge said is this is grand jury material, so this is under the purview of the judicial branch already. So this has to be turned over as opposed to Don McGahn's testimony, which is not.
That does it for my part of Balance of Power, but coming up is going to be June Grasso with Balance of Power. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Italy's on lockdown. Ireland has canceled its St. Patrick's Day parades, and there's pressure from the NBA to have its teams play games without fans in the room. In short, coronavirus continues to upend everyday life and the portfolios of the world's wealthiest. For example, oil magnates Harold Hamm and Jeff Hillenbrand fell off the 500-member Bloomberg Billionaires Index. All told, the world's 500 richest people lost a combined $238.5 billion on Monday, the biggest daily plunge since October 2016. Thankfully, something is on the rise, literally. At a time when hand sanitizer is more valuable than luxury ingredients like lobster, the classic French soufflé is popping up, pun intended, in dining rooms from coast to coast. There's chocolate ones, foie gras and fig flavors, mezcal mint jalapeno soufflés, and delectable soufflé pancakes. Restaurateurs say it's a dish that just makes people happy. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. Amanda Rote, Bloomberg Radio.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow enjoy each other's company.
Most of us don't speak Mandarin. John, do you speak Mandarin?
I do not speak Mandarin.
I just wanted to check that.
Almost as much as they enjoy grilling economic experts.
When this is over, do you bounce back or is there a lasting weakness to it?
Which means that you will enjoy listening.
If things get worse, we're ready to do more.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleto. Move lower for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Stocks plunged after the World Health Organization called the virus spread a pandemic, and the Trump administration remains unable to detail any stimulus measures to combat the economic fallout. S&P 500 index down now by about 4%, wiping out yesterday's rally. The Dow Jones Industrial Average staring down a bear market after the WHO declaration, and still no plans from President Trump. 10-year yield swung by almost 20 basis points before holding near 0.8%. So here's where we stand in equity markets right now. The Dow, low of the day, down 1,200 points, a drop of 4.8%. S&P 500 index down 124 points. That is a drop of 4.3%. And NASDAQ is slumping 342 points, a decline right now of 4.1%. The 10-year, 0.85% right now. We have got gold down 0.3%, $16.45 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude tumbling 2.9%, down $1 a barrel right now at $33.37. David Kostin made a bold call today. The 11-year-old bull market in U.S. stocks is about to become history. The chief strategist for U.S. equities at Goldman Sachs Group cut his year-end forecast for the S&P while trimming his profit estimate for a second time in a month. And billionaire investor Warren Buffett says the recent panic that has hit markets is not as bad as the 2008 financial crisis. His remarks coming in an interview with Yahoo Finance. Again, recapping here, stocks lower across the board. Steep losses for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all down by 4.2% or more. It is 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report, with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are falling along with U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 4.3%, and the S&P 500 is now down 4.5%. France's Airbus has dropped 9.2% in U.S. trading. Demand for aircraft from the plane maker and U.S. rival Boeing is drying up because the coronavirus is curtailing air travel. Air Canada reduced an order for Boeing's grounded 737 MAX jet by 18%. Germany's Adidas, also known as Adidas, has lost more than 13%. The athletic wear maker estimated the coronavirus outbreak will cut earnings from China by about $500 million this quarter. Revenue may be down as much as $1.1 billion. The UK's Prudential has dropped 8.7%. The insurer said the coronavirus has slowed sales momentum in Hong Kong and China this year. And Prudential also said it plans to sell a stake in U.S. unit Jackson National Life. We should note Prudential was not related to the U.S.-based Prudential Financial. And Brazil's Tim Bartiçois, has risen 6%. The wireless company and Telefônica Brazil disclosed plans for a joint offer to buy the mobile unit of Oi, the country's largest fixed-line phone company. Oi is pursuing a $19 billion debt restructuring, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much, Dave Wilson. Now, once again, here's June Grasso.
Thank you, Charlie. Right now, we're going to go to Senator Bernie Sanders, who is speaking after those key losses yesterday in several states.
That if our kids are going to make it into the middle class of this country, we must make public colleges and universities and trade schools tuition free. The American people understand that we cannot continue a cruel and dysfunctional healthcare system, and it is amazing to me to see that even in conservative states like Mississippi, there is an overwhelming understanding that we are now spending twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country, while 87 million of us remain uninsured or underinsured. And this crisis, this absurd healthcare system, is becoming more and more obvious to the American people as we face the challenge of the coronavirus pandemic that we are currently experiencing. Imagine facing a pandemic and having 87 million people who are having a difficult time going to a doctor when they need. And the American people know, unlike Donald Trump, that climate change is an existential threat to our country and the planet, and that we need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And the American people also know that we need fundamental transformation of a broken and racist criminal justice system, as well as a cruel immigration system that keeps millions of people living in fear. But it is not just the ideological debate that our progressive movement is winning. We are winning the generational debate. While Joe Biden continues to do very well with older Americans, especially those people over 65, our campaign continues to win the vast majority of the votes of younger people. And I am talking about people not just in their 20s, but in their 30s and their 40s. The younger generations of this country continue in very strong numbers to support our campaign.
All right, that was Senator Bernie Sanders speaking after his losses last night to Joe Biden. Apparently, Democrats are pressuring him to drop out of the presidential race in order to unify the progressive and moderate wings of the party against their common foe. And Sanders was speaking about the issues that he has been emphasizing throughout the campaign. Turning now to news of today, Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison for raping one woman and sexually assaulting another after decades of using his immense power in Hollywood to target aspiring actresses and sparking the Me Too movement. It's a virtual life sentence for the 67-year-old who's in poor health. Joining me is former federal prosecutor Laurie Levinson, a professor at Loyola University Law School. Laurie, this was short of the maximum, but there were audible gasps in the courtroom when the judge announced the sentence. How harsh is this sentence?
I think a lot of people were surprised by this sentence. It's pretty harsh. It's 23 years. The defense had asked for the 5-year minimum, but the judge clearly thought that not only should Weinstein be held accountable for these particular assaults, but the pattern of conduct that he had.
Well, the judge said, although this was Weinstein's first conviction, it was not a first offense. So if he's basing the sentence on allegations of other women, on things that have been said in the press, is that really fair?
Well, he can consider, the judge, all of the testimony he heard in the courtroom, as well as what's filed through the parties that sort of support these allegations. And what the judge heard about Weinstein is not somebody who had one or two mistakes. That's somebody who was so bold that it was known throughout the industry that that's the way he conducted himself. Having said this, however, there's sure to be an appeal in this case, both of trial issues and now the sentence as well.
Arthur Aidala, one of Weinstein's lawyers, said the sentence was 3 times as long as one the same judge had given a man convicted of first-degree rape and the drugging of a female employee. And as you said, he said that they'll appeal that. Is that a good challenge to the sentence length on appeal?
Well, certainly getting a sentence of this length makes it more likely that the Court of Appeal will take a close look. Judges have broad discretion in sentencing. They can send all sorts of messages. But 23 years, as you said, is more like a life sentence, and that will get the Court of Appeal's attention.
Weinstein made a rambling speech to the court seeking mercy, but comparing his prosecution to the McCarthy era. And I'm sure the judge already had a sentence in mind and obviously was not moved by Weinstein's. Was it a good idea to make a speech like that when you're not going to apologize and when you have an appeal and also another trial coming up in California?
I definitely think that's not a great strategy. At the time of sentencing, the judge is looking for a show of remorse, for accountability, for taking responsibility. And Weinstein instead is making himself into the victim. It's also not going to serve Weinstein well as California, Los Angeles tries to figure out whether they still want to go on their case. If they don't think he got the message from the 23-year sentence in New York, then they'll have more incentive to say, we'll try him too.
Well, Lori, would they try him in any event in case an appeal works in the case?
They might, and we heard Gloria Allred, who represents some of the women in this case, say this case is going forward. But we never know for sure. And so we don't know right now whether Weinstein will fight extradition. We don't know whether the assessment is that 23 years is enough. And again, by attacking the case, it does make it more likely the prosecutors here say he's not going to roll over on the appeal, so we do need a backup.
Just about a minute here, but one of the grounds for appeal will be the judge allowing witnesses on prior bad acts and then allowing other witnesses to testify to their credibility. So sort of, credibility on credibility. Is that likely to be overturned?
Again, the court has broad discretion in deciding other prior bad acts. The court didn't allow in the more than 70 women who I understand might have wanted to come to court. So it's an evidentiary issue, but I don't think that it's strong enough now for Weinstein to bet on his case being overturned.
Thanks as always, Lori. That's Lori Levinson, former prosecutor and professor at Loyola University Law School in Los Angeles. Coming up, we're going to be talking about a victory for House Democrats, finally, in their battle to get information from President Trump. And a little later, Justice Sonia Sotomayor is recusing herself from one case, but it's not a case that directly affects President Trump. Remember, he called on Sotomayor and Justice